Hi, this is Joe Chambers. Welcome to Musicians Hall of Fame Backstage the Vault Series. Today's interview is with one of my good friends, Bobby Wood. Bobby was in Memphis as a solo artist. He had a car wreck, kind of took his direction a little bit different. He went from being like the guy in the front to being the guy out of the spotlight as a session musician. He's played on so many hit records. He was part of the group that was known as the Memphis Boys, or when they were in Memphis, it was the 827 Thomas Street Band. And they did all these great recordings at American Studio. And then when American closed down, Bobby, like with Reggie Young, moved here to Nashville and did it all over again here in Nashville. Hope you enjoy it. If you do, be sure to hit like, subscribe, and the notification bell so you don't miss any of our new content. Once again, one of the greatest piano players, session musicians there ever was, Bobby Wood. Where did you do That's the Way Love Goes? Was that here?
Yeah, at 1111.
1111?
Yeah. I had worked on a lot of his stuff before. I found out later was his favorite keyboard player. And I played on some of his earlier stuff way back at the Quonset Hut and different places. But he came in and so we just kind of got our own little arrangement on it. And it was like a No Lefty for Sale song, I believe. And we kind of took it out of that bag and put it in a little funky bag, and that's been his biggest song to date, his biggest seller.
I'd say it's probably my favorite.
Yeah. Yeah, we just, I was playing Wurlitzer through Boss Chorus, which made it stereo, and we just did I've been throwing horseshoes, and then Reggie came in with that funky rhythm, and so it's just the way it went.
So you came up with that riff there?
Yeah.
I just set the whole mood, man. It's great.
Merle just sang his fanny off on it too. Of course, Merle loved Lefty for Sale. That was his hero too, I think we cut 2 or 3 #1 records on that session, and I forget what the other 2 was, but. They all was #1, and he maybe cut 4 sides that day, and 3 of them was #1. So he did pretty good.
That was a good day.
Yeah, it was.
So was Jerry Lee your most or your first influence?
Yeah, into rock and roll. And
his piano playing.
Yeah,
he is a musician and
groove
all
and feel and the whole works. It just it was just, it got me. And I was a teenager, and then a little later on, after I'd gone to Memphis and auditioned for Sam Phillips, he said, "Bobby Wood, I don't need another Jerry Lee, I got one." He says, "Bring me a Bobby Wood." And it just made me, hurt my feelings so bad. And I got to thinking about what he said, and I said, the guy's right, We don't need another carbon copy of something. You have to be your own. And I learned identity back even that far. This was early 60s, maybe 61, 62. Well, my first recording was actually on Sun Records. I think they probably stamped about 100, pressed about 100, and which didn't do anything, but I was staff keyboard player at Sun at the time, and of course I'd been working with Chrisman and Reggie and Emmons and Mike Leach and all those guys and Cogbill. And the opportunity came along with Chips. He had the Atlantic account and the Bell Records account. And
for
all
those
that.
Chips.
And Chips Moman. And so the rest of the guys had kind of gone ahead and gone over to American Studios. And he told me, he said that I can keep you working around the clock, of which, sessions in Memphis at that time, we'd do maybe 1, 2 sessions a week, maybe. At High or Sun or Roland James' place. I finally told Chips that, yeah, I'll come over. And so we worked there
so for
67 through 71, I guess.
So Chips, for the people listening, Chips Moman owned American Studios in Memphis.
And we were known as the 827 Thomas Street Band, myself, Reggie Young, and the guys I mentioned, Gene Chrisman. And so we worked there in one place for the next 4 or 5 years, I guess.
Very much like, say, the Nashville A-team of that period, or the Funk Brothers from Motown and something?
Yeah, we were opposite stacks. We were cutting R&B, pop, some country, and some jazz. We did Herbie Mann jazz album, Memphis Underground. And we did artists like B.J. Thomas, Neil Diamond, Wilson Pickett, Dionne Warwick, just, you know, on and on. And of course, 1969 Elvis came in the first time, and we did 4 number ones for him, which was In the Ghetto, Suspicious Minds, Don't Cry Daddy, and Kentucky Rain.
You also did Little Red Riding Hood for Sam the Sham?
Yeah, that was in Sundays, around, it was around 64, 65, somewhere in there. What brought Elvis to Memphis was Cry Like a Baby and Hooked on a Feeling and Sweet Caroline and all that stuff that we were doing. And that's the reason he came to Memphis, because we were actually hotter than he was at the time, because Elvis had gotten down to where he wasn't selling but 250,000 records, you know. And so this was his first, In the Ghetto was one of his first big songs from that. And he actually made a statement too that he had more fun doing that, and he worked harder than he'd worked in years. And he said he had more fun doing the sessions just because we was in the creative mode and the groove mode, and he was an old R&B guy too, you know, so he really enjoyed doing those sessions.
So there was definitely something in the water there. Yeah.
Yeah, it was just something that happened. But you know, Chips was a song person, and like, you know, a lot of producers and A&R people. He was Alan Reynolds is one of those song people too. But we came over here and just got promised, you know, a lot of work. And
they called y'all the Memphis Boys.
And then Nashville dubbed us the Memphis Guys or the Memphis Boys, you know. And I left in early '72 or January of '72, and then. And
you had a house here?
Yeah, I had a house here, and they'd come through and sit and talk and want to know what it was like, and I said, come on over, you can work all you want to, you know. And so they ended up all of them moving here in the middle of the year of '72, I believe, August, somewhere around there, July. But anyway, we started cutting demos around the clock, basically, and then, you know, a few masters, but then...
And the first session you played on here, the first song you played on was? Why Me Lord. Couldn't start out at the top, could you?
No. Just was lucky, I guess.
and that was cut at?
Fred Foster, Monument.
Monument Records?
Yeah. Yeah. And then I guess the next big thing I worked on was, I don't know what had happened. Either Pig was sick or had double booked or something, and Billy Sanford had told Billy Sherrill that there was another keyboard player in town that he probably should listen to, and I got called in on the last album that Tammy and George did, the Golden Rings album, and it was Bob Moore, Buddy Harmon, Grady Martin, all my heroes, you know, from here. You know, I love those guys. And I was scared to death. You know, I almost had tears rolling down my face, sitting there with earphones on, listening to Tammy and George sing. Because I've been a George Jones fan forever. I don't know anybody that's not a George Jones fan, including Ray Charles and those people, you know. But I've never found one R&B person that didn't love George Jones, you know. But I almost cried, you know. I was sitting there choking, you know. What am I doing here, you know? So
you were at studio at the Quonset Hut then?
Quonset Hut, Studio B, yeah. And this was probably mid-'70s, I guess, somewhere in there.
Speaking of Ray Charles, did you play on the session that Billy produced? The
Seven Spanish Angels? Yeah.
You need to add that to your list.
Yeah, I didn't put that in there. But no, that's the first time I'd ever met Ray Charles, and he was one of my big heroes too. Me and my wife got married playing and dancing to his songs. I Can't Stop Loving You and all that stuff, you know. Charles was great.
And I met Ray here too when Billy was doing it. He was a nice guy.
Yeah, yeah, he was. He was. Ray could get a little bit sideways sometimes. He on this one song that we was doing, I don't remember what it was, but he'd put just, you know, this god awful. one of those chords, you know, it was like a big jazz chord, and I was playing Rhodes on the session, Fender Rhodes, and I didn't have a clue as to what he was playing, and I figured I was going to get pounced on, so I just leaned over his shoulder and saw what he was playing and wrote it down and just nailed it when it came by. And Cheryl was trying to get him not to play it because he said it didn't fit in this song. And of course they were sitting there arguing with each other, you know, and I said, I ain't getting in the middle of this, you know. So I just nailed it when it came time to do it, and didn't get pounced on by nobody.
Did he give anybody a hard time in the?
Yeah, he would. I remember there was one situation with Pete Drake, and he wanted Pete to play a 4-bar turnaround, and Pete was in the studio over an hour trying to do that, and Cheryl all the time was trying to tell Ray that he's not that kind of a player. He's one of those guys that plays those slides, you know. He said he's not a melody player. He's a different kind of player. But Ray was not going to have it, you know. He just kept on with it. And Pete, he finally came back in the control room after about an hour of being out there. He was white as a sheet.
Yeah.
I mean, he was really just beat down, and but he finally got it, you know. But it took a while because, you know, after all of what Cheryl said, the guy was not that kind of a player. You know? You probably know the guy I'm talking about. The guy told him he wanted Leon Russell type piano on this one song, and so this keyboard player just went to the phone and called Leon Russell.
No, he didn't.
He said, "You want Leon Russell? I'll get him for you. You know, don't make me play something." But just there was some funny things that happened after I moved here, and this same guy told me, he said, if you play on 2 sessions a year that you love, he said you're going to be lucky. You know? And I didn't know what he was talking about, but you know, working when producers want their 4 sides for 3 hours, you know, there's only so much you can do on those. You know, I didn't come out of that school. We came out of taking a day if it was necessary on one song until we got what we were happy with. And I think more so with country music you can do that with, because the spectrum of at that time of where you can get outside the lines was pretty narrow.
Yeah.
You know. And
you said that you really started working a lot on Fender Rhodes once the Rhodes came out. It kind of put the vibe.
Took the place of the vibes. Yeah. And that's when I got hired on a lot of sessions. I got to work a lot with Pig Robbins, which is one of my favorite keyboard players too. You know, he's a honey bear.
Pig is. I never did any work that I remember without Pig, and probably you.
Yeah, a lot of people wouldn't do it, and I don't blame them, because I mean he's the greatest country piano player that I've ever heard. You know. And I didn't see how he did things like behind closed doors that changed keys and stuff in the middle of the song, and it was just like had weird chord changes and stuff. And once he heard it, I mean, it's just like one time through usually, and he got it. You know, it's like, this is amazing. The guy can't see a thing. You know.
Yeah, it was. It never got old to me. It never ever got old to me. Whether I was lucky enough to be sitting in one of Cheryl's sessions, which happened a lot, and just watch Pig sitting out there. You know, he just sit there at the stool, motionless. You know, everybody else just, you know, scribbling around and, you know, and writing their numbers down and all that, and then play them. You know, he just plays it. And it's just
Pig was hilarious. He was. I usually
funny.
sat back to back to him, and we would tell jokes and stuff between songs.
Yeah,
you know?
yeah.
And we got to know each other pretty good, but you know, I'll let him know that he was one of my heroes. You know, and somebody told him. I think it was Grady Martin told him one time. He said, "You wasn't born blind." He said, "I stole you blind. I stole all your licks." And I told him one day, of course, you know, I lost my right eye in a wreck that time, and I told him one day, I said, "Pig, I just figured out one thing." I said, "I'm half as good as you are." And he said, "How do you figure that?" And I said, "I'm half blind." He got a big chuckle out of it.
Oh, he's something else, I tell you.
He is. And Chip Young hired us to do Billy Swan, I Can Help. And we cut that out in Murfreesboro at the log cabin out there. You know, Chip suggested I play a Fats Domino type triplet piano thing on I Can Help, and I just... I begged him not to let me play that, make me play that on there, because I felt like he already had a hit record, you know. And if you did that, it would just sound like something else, you know. And the way that old Farfisa organ was sounding, and the double time sock cymbal on the drums was going, and the extra things that was going on in that record, I said, gosh, that's a smash. I mean, just finish this thing and do your little few things and tidbits and everything. And I said, I'll guarantee you that's a #1 record. And sure enough, they finished it very carefully. We got out and did some yelling and tambourine and hand claps and stuff on it, and boy, that thing zipped right to the top.
Mm-hmm.
So, you know, it's just things that your experience tells you that, or your gut feeling says, no, that's about done, folks. Put it out. You know.
You played on every Garth Brooks record.
Mm-hmm.
That would be enough for a career in itself.
Well, you'd think so.
100 million sales.
Yeah.
So you've played on 100 million records just from one artist.
Mm-hmm.
You're greedy.
I'm lucky. That's what it is. I'm lucky.
That's truly amazing. And what was Garth like to work with?
Garth was just a very gracious person. You know, he was there to learn, and we had many conversations about the business and what you do and don't do, and you know, I told him you know, that we need to go back to the past and do things. If you got a great song, let's work on this thing. We'll get it right. You know, not be in a hurry. And I guess the first album, he probably didn't have the budget to do that, but from then on, he did have the budget to do it. So we learned. I mean, we may come in the next day and recut something we'd already cut the day before. You know, if it wasn't to his taste or Alan's taste or our taste. You know, but it was just a great way to do records. You know.
So you started off on his demos.
Yeah.
And went through the entire so far.
You know, talking about a producer being honest, of course, me and Alan Reynolds go all the way back to Memphis days. You know,
Is that how you met?
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
He was actually president of Branch Bank. I forget what bank it was, but anyway.
So he knows money and music.
Yeah. I walked in the studio. Of course, you know, we'd done some things that was a little different with Garth. You know, we'd kind of discussed some things that we didn't need to cut him like George Strait or typically Nashville, and I made a mention to him or Garth or somebody, I forget who it was, that, you know, maybe we ought to take him about halfway to Memphis and do it a little bit more soulful and put a little funk in it, and still keep it country at the same time, you know. And, you know, but, you know, how many times had we done that in the past and it didn't work, you know. So, you know, I can't say that was, you know, it might have worked that time, I'm not sure, you know. But anyway, I walked in the studio over there one day, and after maybe the second album was just taking off like hotcakes, you know, sold a couple of million, you know, and I said, we called each other pal, and I says, pal, what do you think? And he said, I don't know. You know, I said, an honest man. An honest man. I said, I appreciate you saying that, because I don't either. You know, it's just something that worked and happened. We don't know, you know. And even Garth told me one day, I told him, I said, you know what, I think sometimes the guy up in the sky just kind of points to people and says, let's see what he's going to do with it or what she's going to do with it. You know, and he said, I think you may be right. And even Garth knew that. You know, he said, I don't know that we'd done anything that was any different than anybody else. It just happened, you know. But no, Elvis was that way. We spent many a night in the studio with him and talking about different things, you know, and of course, you know, me and him had a lot in common with, because, you know, we was born about 20 miles apart, you know, Tupelo and near Albany was where I was from, and you know, two Mississippi boys, and kind of talk the same language too, you know. So, but we had quite a few conversations about his how fast everything was in movie land and Hollywood and all that, and what, you know, what the difference was between that and, you know, coming back home and to reality and calling his mom up to get in touch with reality and stuff like that, you know. And his mom was very Christian person, you know, and he, you know, Elvis was just kind of, that was the only touch I think that he had was getting his feet back on solid ground, you know, with his mom. But we had several conversations like that. Remember, I was sitting on the piano bench one night with him. It was probably 3 o'clock in the morning, you know. We were just talking about going to church and just everything, you know. And been sitting there talking with him for probably 30 minutes, I guess, and it dawned on me, I'm sitting here cheek to cheek with the king, you know, and I almost started hallucinating, you know. I said, God, I'm sitting here talking to Elvis Presley, you know. And I mean, just talking down to earth as you could talk, you know, just about just whatever came to our mind, you know. But he was a very, very cordial person. And, you know, I guess the one thing that he had charisma out the yin-yang, man. I mean, from the first night that we worked with him, I even knew when he was in the back parking lot. I mean, that's how much charisma that guy had. And, you know, most of us had psyched ourselves out of working with Elvis, you know. It's like, you know, wait a minute, we're hotter right now than he is, so what's the big deal, you know. But I choked when he walked in the back door, man. I mean, I literally had to choke back, you know. And, gosh, you know, best looking guy I'd ever seen, you know. I'm not that way, you know.
That's what Scotty said.
But he was
15
definitely
years
a good looking dude, man. And those navy blue leathers he had on, you know, and of course the high collar stuff and jet black hair. But, you know, on top of that, he was just very, very friendly type, cordial person, you know. And like I said, he was going to give me his big diamond ring one night, and I wouldn't take it, you know. I was admiring his ring, and he took it off and handed it to me, and I was just looking at it, you know. And I handed it back to him. He said, "No, that's yours." I said, "No, man." I said, "First place, it's about 14 sizes too big for me, you know." But I said, "I wouldn't take nothing from you, man. I just want your friendship. That's all, you know." But that's, you know, I think that's probably, not patting myself on the back, but probably what Garth liked about me too, was knowing that I usually went to bat for something that was right against something that was terribly wrong, you know, especially in the day that we're living in, you know. And you know, I'll stand up for the underdog every time, you know. And you know, Elvis and Garth was kind of like that too, you know. It's like we, you know, we don't care what may be politically correct, you know. We're going to stand up for what's right. And I said, I think in the long run that usually wins out, you know. And even if it don't, I got to feel good about myself anyway, or live with myself. But, you know, talking to those two guys, they were just a whole lot alike, you know, personality-wise.
Did you hang out with Elvis a lot?
No, just in the studio. When I was dating my wife, we went to a couple of his, like the fairgrounds party that he would have. When the fairgrounds would close down, he'd rent the whole place, and the gates would be locked and everything, and just his people would come in, and we'd ride rides till 2 or 3 o'clock in the morning, you know. And you know, I got a chance to meet him early on. I say early on, I'm not sure exactly when this was. It must have been sometime early 60s, I guess, because I'm not sure when he was came out of the Army. Was that?
Yeah,
60, somewhere around there. But you know, I got to talk to him bits then, you know. It's just you know, and I told him I had met him when I was probably 12 years old, when my family went to Sun Records to put down a little 3 or 4 songs, and Elvis was sitting behind the desk, you know. This was before, you know, he had ever done anything, you know. And I said I'd remember that because I'd gotten embarrassed. Sam Phillips actually had done the recording for us, and saw his picture underneath the glass in the front desk out front. And I said, you know, I saw this guy's picture. A friend of mine showed it to me some time back. He said this guy was going to be a star, and he was from Tupelo and all that. Sam says, well, meet Elvis Presley. And he was sitting behind the desk, and I got all red-faced and everything. Oh, didn't even pay attention. But now that was the first time and I reminded him that I had met him back then, and he remembered it, actually. He remembered that me and my 2 sisters had come in and done some gospel songs, you know. Of course, gospel music was part of his life too, you know. And he was backstage every time he was in town to the Statesman and the Blackwood Brothers and all that when they'd have concerts in Memphis. And
Did you ever go to Graceland with him?
No, I was invited several times, but I never went out. That was when we were in the studio around the clock, and again, you know, it's
Just
like,
it seems like at
just
the time
missed everything, man.
you it seems like there'll always be tomorrow, doesn't it?
Yeah.
And you just end up.
Yeah.
Sometimes there is.
It's like I wish I'd have gone on the road with him now, you know, but I didn't know at the time. Of course, you know, when you're fresh into a new place and trying to get your feet in the door, well, you don't want to mess that up, you know, and take off again, you know. So I was just afraid to leave, really. So, and but no, it's just been some good times, you know.
How about you did a lot of Crystal Gayle stuff as well as wrote Talking in Your Sleep.
Yeah, I had 3 songs by her, Talking in Your Sleep, Half the Way, and He's Beautiful to Me, and a song that her first release on CBS or Columbia was Keeping Power, and she changed labels right in the middle of it, and they pulled that record off the charts. It was zooming up the charts. She changed labels, and of course, radio stations wouldn't play that one anymore. I got caught in the middle of that. But anyway, yeah, I played on most of her stuff, except the very first album, and then when she went with Bowen, I didn't play on hardly any of that. So, but the Alan Reynolds stuff, I played on probably 98% of. But Pig played on Brown Eyes Blue, and of course I played on Talking in Your Sleep and the other things. But anyway, we got to know each other pretty well in probably 12, 15 years, I guess.
How'd you like George?
George is one of my heroes. You mean Jones or Strait?
Yeah,
Jones.
George.
No, the George.
Yeah.
George was great, man. He just like, you know, just sang his fanny off on whatever he was doing, you know, and it was just a pleasure working with him. And plus, you know, I'd always admired Billy Sherrill too. He was one of my favorite producers and A&R people. And
1978 through 1990. That was a lot of records.
Yeah, I was either playing Fender Rhodes or acoustic, and I was telling you earlier, something happened to Pig on the one of his big ones is He Stopped Loving Her Today, and I ended up playing acoustic on that. What there was of it, but that ended up being one of his biggest records ever.
Well, it's voted the #1 country song of all time.
Yeah.
That between that one and Stand By Your Man.
Stand By Your Man, yeah, right.
Both of them cut same producer, same studio.
Yeah, right.
I always heard. Now you played on Lucille and Daytime Friends. I always heard that Kenny didn't want to do Lucille. Is that true?
That's true.
Were you there?
I was there.
The story I heard was that Larry had been trying to get Kenny to cut the song, and he kept refusing to do it.
Yeah.
And that they had got down to about 10 minutes left on the session or something like
Yeah,
that.
it's probably 1 o'clock in the morning, I guess, 12:30, something like that.
And you finish it then,
Okay.
since you were there.
Kenny actually made the statement, if I do this song and it'd be a hit, I'd have to sing it the rest of my life, and he didn't like it. He had to have his arm twisted to do it, and Butler just kept saying, well, just do one take on it. And so that's basically about what it was. We might have done the second one, but I think it was one take. And so that was...
That's what I heard. I heard that Kenny said, I'll sing it one time.
Yeah, that's what happened. That's exactly what happened. But anyway, I mean, it was his, probably that shot him into his first comeback. That was his first comeback record.
I remember playing in some dive in North or South Carolina somewhere. You know, it was just short of having chicken wire wrapped around the stage. And that's all anybody wanted to hear was Lucille.
It was one of those songs like Friends in Low Places and those kind of songs, you know, it's just like...
And we were just doing Chicago and Blood, Sweat and Tears, you know, and we had to learn Lucille.
Fine time to leave me, Lucille.
Unbelievable. I'm sure he doesn't mind singing it now.
Well, I mean, it launched his career the second time. Was it second or third time around?
Well, you know, he's one of those few guys that actually.
He's had 3 or 4 careers.
Well, I mean, you know, everybody dreams of having one career record.
B.J. Thomas is one of those guys too.
You know,
He's had 2 or 3.
one career record. Kenny has Coward of the County, Lady.
Yeah.
You Decorated My Life.
What's the Gambler? The
Gambler.
Yeah, right.
I mean,
that beat
golly.
us out at CMA. That beat Talking in Your Sleep out at the CMA. I've never gotten over that. I still hold a grudge against it.
I don't blame you. Well, you know, so hey, you know, so he missed one. You know, he was wrong about Lucille, but
Yeah, that's what happened. I was there, and I think Reggie was on the session too, and several, maybe Larry London. I'm not sure who was playing drums, but there was a bunch of us there.
And I'm not sure if the version of Always on My Mind that you played on with Willie wasn't as popular as, or more so maybe than even Elvis's was. Do you think?
Oh yeah, it was. It actually got Song of the Decade of what, the 80s. Yeah, it was a song of the 80s, and it was just a huge record. I remember we started that track at Willie's studio down in Texas, and he had bought a piano from over here at one of the piano companies in Hunted Oaks. It's Bosendorfer. It was like a 10-foot. I mean, you could mirror effect and everything on it. You know, beautiful looking piano. But I had gone over to play the thing at some point, and it was probably undoubtedly the worst piano I ever played in my life. I mean, even the top end up high sounded bassy to me, you know. Well, when we got down to Texas, Willie had went and bought this piano. And the intro on Always on My Mind was, you know, that... that, you know, they had to actually put every bit of the high end on that they had on the board to crank it up for that piano to sound like a piano on that intro, man. I mean, it was just, it sounded like I was playing. That's how it sounded. And of course, Willie asked me when we got in the studio, he said, "What do you think about that piano?" And I said, "Willie, I don't really want to hurt your feelings, but I said, that's the worst piano I ever played in my life." And he says, "Oh, well." $50,000. I mean, that was cheap for that piano. That piano was like a $200,000 piano, but that's the reason it went for $50,000, because it wasn't a great piano.
How'd you like working with Neil Diamond?
It was fine. He was probably as different as anybody we had ever recorded. And the same thing with him, he hated Sweet Caroline.
No kidding.
Hated it. And,
I love that record.
Oh, yeah. It was probably his signature record of all time. And
y'all did that in American?
we did that in American, yeah. And it was actually his lick that he had me to play on piano. It was like, Sweet Carol, I say, Sweet Caroline. That was the piano lick originally, and they took that off and put horns on, you know. But he actually had me to play that lick. He was a very musical guy and a very soulful guy. But to understand his songs, I have to tell you, I didn't understand one of them. I just played what I felt, you know. But no, he was one talented dude. He was one of those guys that had a commercial voice for that day. B.J. Thomas had a commercial, you know, voice. Kenny Rogers had a commercial voice. There was just a lot of people that every time they opened their mouth, you know, it was very commercial.
On B.J., golly, Hooked on a Feeling, Can't Stop Believing, Eyes of a New York Woman, Somebody Done Somebody Wrong song.
Mm-hmm.
You know what, though? He's one of those guys that he could sing a phone book, though. You know, it'd be hard to decide which one's the single.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think the first release we had, I believe, on him after he came up from Texas and did the Lonesome, I'm So Lonesome, was Hooked on a Feeling. And that was a Mark James song. He was one of our staff writers. And I'm not sure who wrote the. I just can't help believing. I play it for you. I don't. Seemed like somebody from New York wrote that. Cynthia Weil or some of those people. But they had some songwriting teams that just about lived at American that from New York, that came down, and we recorded a lot of their songs. I think that was one of them.
Have any memories of any of your favorite sessions? Anything that sticks out?
I guess working the R&B stuff was about as memorable to me as anything. For me to come into a situation of out of rock and roll, which is way up on top of the beat, and jumping ahead, and pushing to those 6/8 R&B things where you feel like you can go get a milkshake between beats. It's like learning to do that, and once I learned to do that was a highlight of my life. It's just those things. Just those kind of things was just incredible for me to learn that old R&B gospel type thing, and just play groove on people like Pickett and Joe Tex and different people that were cut, Dionne Warwick, and Sweet Inspirations, just on and on, Blossoms.
Was there a healthy competition between you guys and Stax, or did y'all ever see or talk to each other? Or?
Yeah, we knew. I didn't see those guys a lot when we were at American. Like I say, we were working around the clock. Between pop and R&B and jazz and country and whatever we was doing. I didn't see a lot of them anymore at that point. But the earlier Sundays that we were talking about, I got to work a lot with Duck and Cropper, and actually Al Jackson did a lot of work at Sun Records, different things. What a great guy. He had a great drummer. One of the greatest drummers, and most simple guys you'd ever meet. He'd just lay that backbeat down. It'd just be so simple, and just, in the middle of something, just boom, it might go for 16 bars like that, and it'd just be just laying right there, and it was just so easy working with a drummer like that. And Chrisman is another one of those. He lays a beat in there. To tell you a funny story, I didn't even know that Hooked on a Feeling or some of those things was #1 because we was working around the clock between cutting the writers' demos and doing Diamond and BJ and all these people. We were working so hard that, when you got in your car and went home at 5 o'clock in the morning, you didn't want to hear any music. And I think BJ was in on his second album before I even knew it had #1. And we were working around the clock so much that different one of the guys had their experiences. I actually had an out-of-body experience one night, probably 3 o'clock in the morning, and I'd come unglued from myself and was standing there watching myself play. And I got up and said, guys, I got to go home. It's time to get out of here. This is getting too spooky. But it was just, tired, fatigued, just worked too hard. And I think Reggie, at one point, went out back and uncontrollably couldn't quit crying. It was like, and he didn't know why, it was just the same thing. It was just, each one of the guys was just worn out.
Okay, now you want to come clean on what y'all were doing?
No.